chop it up. Come to the show. We got some things we can talk about. Ooh, chop it up. Chop it, chop it, chop it, chop it up. Chop it. We got some things we can talk about. Ooh, chop it up. Chop it, chop it, chop it up. Chop it up. Chop it. We got some things we can talk about. Ooh.
You are now tuned in to the Chop Shop with your host, Pastor Marvin McKenstry Jr. Let's chop it up.
Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, wherever you may be. I hope that you are already putting yourself in a mode and a mind to give thanks. That's right, y'all. We're on Tuesday night, which is not our normal night. So we really need you to like, love, and share this broadcast so that people know that we are on. Of course, when Thursday comes, I don't know, man. Thursday by 6 p.m., I might be somewhere with my pants unbuckled, hoping that I can survive the late night football game that's going to come on because I done ate so good, fellowshipped, and loved on my family. But y'all, this is a great time. It's always a great time to be thankful, but this is a good time to give thanks. I spent most of my day today running around with turkeys, giving turkeys to people. Before I go any further, let me bring on my right hand and my left hand, my main man on the ones and twos, making the magic happen, Mr. Shaka Pitts, Techniques 1200, because anything else is uncivilized. Shaka, I felt like Santa Claus with a sleigh full of turkeys today, man. And listen, I know it becomes novelty for some people. Hey, Kia, I know it becomes novelty for some people, but man, giving out those turkeys today were a little bit different. Thinking about, just what being able to have a meal and how different, what a difference that can make in the life of somebody at this time of year that doesn't already have one.
Nah, it's real in the field, Marv, and especially for people, man, who don't have the same blessings as everyone else, or what people consider the standard blessings, right? So there's some people who are not standard. There's some people who are going through some things, and to know that there's people out there who's willing to meet them out there and help them out, that means a lot to those people, man. Like trust me, Marv. As good as you feel right now, imagine how the people feel for seeing you and the rest of the people out there, man. So that's a beautiful thing, Marv. Where were you at? What part of town?
You know where I was at, man. I was right down right. You know where I was at,
yeah,
man.
I was down
where I love to be. And this year we did it a little differently. We didn't do a massive giveaway. We targeted some families that really specifically had a need, and a few involved some of our elders. Man, listen, we have got to take care of our seniors, y'all. I know y'all normally hear me. I'm the youth guy. I'm the job guy. We have got to listen, y'all know me. Y'all know I love my grandmother. I cared for my grandmother until God called her home. We have got to make sure that we're making sure that our seniors are good in our community. And today I got to bless some of our seniors that really aren't those people. They ain't stockpiling turkeys. I know what people say, oh, them people got 4 turkeys by the time they get yours. And even if that's the case, to God be the glory. That's some time that they ain't going to have to look for a meal. So look, we about to go on and bust into these church announcements, y'all. Y'all know, as always, we kick this segment off with our Stop the Beef hotline because, listen, they say that we're a city in crisis. I say that we're a city that's working on solutions. Y'all know they've been throwing that 300 number around, and we always say in the We Are Us men's movement that one life is one too many. We don't want to see a single life lost. So it's devastating that we hit 300, but not another one has to die. If you or somebody you know is involved in some level of conflict, and that conflict needs some resolution up and through financial resources to help assist. I was literally talking to somebody today where somebody messed up some money involved in a drug dealing situation and literally negotiating to make sure that this situation can be handled. First of all, where the young man who wants to change his life don't have to put himself back at risk, and no harm has to come to anybody. This is what we do, and that's how we do it, with the most boots on the ground engagement that you'll ever encounter. All right, y'all, the Baltimore Peace Agreement walks hand in hand with it. If we have not been to your community, reach out to the men of the We Are Us movement, and we are coming to your community to make sure that the peace agreement can find you and those who need to understand that peace can and will reign. The peace team, one of my favorite guys, EB, got the peace team up in the northeast Baltimore corridor of the city, northern Baltimore corridor of the city, up around Woodburn and York Road in that area, and we down in the Po Homes in what they call the southwest in are literally blessed to have literally seen more than a year without any homicides. It's doable. Call the We Are Us Men's Movement. Let us come and show you how to get it done. We got any more church? All right, all right, all right. Thursdays at 1 p.m. We actually broadcasted earlier today because Thursday is a holiday. But Thursdays at 1 p.m., if you're looking for an opportunity, the Mayor's Office of Employment Development is looking for you with a focus on economic justice. We are building a workforce system that really works. Y'all, we just had a massive job fair last week, and we had a lot of people are blessed with opportunities. So we want you to get connected to the Mayor's Office of Employment Development so the next opportunity that you need can be handed to you through that relationship. Victory House Worship Center, 10 o'clock Sunday mornings. Come on in. This is our Youth Sunday. I should have sent you the flyer. This is our Youth Sunday coming up, y'all. The youth are going to be in charge of everything. We got one of our aspiring hip-hop artists who's a young adult male in my church, Brother Kai. He's going to be ministering one of his songs. The youth are just taking over. And this dynamic young blessing that God has given me, he's like a son to me, everything from a son to a little brother. Pastor Cheo Thomas, who is serving as our youth pastor, is going to be delivering the word. You will not be disappointed. This young man loves God, and he loves to bring the word of God. All right, y'all, I think that might be it. And it's time for us to get ready to dive into these conversations. Look, y'all notice that we're doing a little bit of different format. And in this first half hour of the show, we're going to be talking to one of our favorite guests, a brother who has been in the trenches working around police reform long before there was a Freddie Gray, long before we had an uprising, long before, because he's a person that experienced what was the inequity in policing in Baltimore City and decided that what he was going to do with his second chance in life is he was going to make a difference, and specifically of some of the many things that he do, put a specific emphasis on working to reform police in Baltimore. He is the director of the Citizens Policing Project. The brothers wrote some legislation and some other powerful things that's bringing about real change. I want to introduce to some and present to others my big brother, Ray Kelly. What's up, Ray?
How's it going, little bro? Everything good on your
It's
end?
going great, man. It's going great, man. I told people I was with some folks today, and I told them, I said, even coming up on this holiday and how much I miss Mama, man. I'm excited to get in that kitchen tomorrow and start blessing her honor with them great skills that she gave me.
Right. And I'll tell you the truth. It's going to be a different trying Thanksgiving for us. We had a death in the family, but I'm still thankful because
Absolutely.
there's a lot of opportunities out there to make this place better for a lot of other people. So as long as I see that moving forward, I know that my trials are just that, trials.
And I got to do some of that today. Ray, I always give you a resounding introduction. I think I bring y'all up better than Steve Harvey, but I want you to tell the people a little bit about you, and just who you are in the context of this work that you do.
So I've been a public safety police reform advocate now for about 15 years in Baltimore. I am a returning citizen. I am a recovering addict. And you're right, I do try to promote the concept of change because I'm living proof that change can happen. And that's my gift to our community is the fact that I'm here to help people change the same way I did and just to make our community better. And my focus has always been public safety through a lens of individual accountability, and that includes the police. So even though I've been working collaboratively with the police department to bring down violence and make safer communities, I've always been the one to ensure that they're held accountable to the residents of our city.
Ray, I want to talk to you about specifically this local control matter. I walked into the booth to cast my ballot, and I saw the most odd looking question. I think it was question K on the ballot, if I'm not mistaken.
Question H.
Question H. Baltimore City gets a police department to be administrated over, or, and I don't have the exact language, but to be administrated over by a police commissioner. And I'm like, man, I knew what it was talking about, but that's some strange language for this matter of local control. But nonetheless, it won in the vote tremendously. Talk to us first about the way that that language was crafted. Was there some other agenda going on with the way they crafted the language for the question on the ballot?
So I don't think it was another agenda as it was protective language. So the first step in this process would be to give the Baltimore City administration the authority. So that's simply what that language was about, given the authority. So right now, the Baltimore Police Department is headed by the police commissioner, similar to the language, but it's not an agency of a city. So that question H was a charter amendment, amending the city charter to include a Baltimore City Police Department. So Baltimore City has never really had a municipal police department included in their charter as an executive office. So
You,
now that's what this enables to create that. Now the work starts to create the entity, but we have the authority. We will have the authority in January when sessions start to actually create our own police department.
you're a great historian, man, and you have educated me so much in the ways of police reform. As being such a great youth advocate, got me in some police spaces. In some cases, that should have been yours, but we wound up there together, right? But talk to us historically about how we found ourselves in a place where the state had control over the Baltimore City Police Department.
So in actuality, that happened 160 years ago, 1860, pre-Civil War, pre-emancipation. Maryland is a Confederate state. So there were issues with conflict against what Maryland as a state believed, what the city believed, as we all know, because of the port and the commerce in Baltimore City, it was considered what we call a free city. So black people were actually getting paid here. We got these little alley houses. That's kind of how those neighborhoods came about. And essentially, there was this group called the Know Nothing Party. That's kind of their what do they call it when it's a pseudonym. That's their pseudonym. They were actually originally called the Native American Episcopalian Party. So really, they were anti-Semites. They hated the Catholics. They hated the Jews. They hated anybody that sympathized with black people, and they were violent. So there were riots in the city. People believed that the Baltimore police weren't actually enforcing the laws of the state, but catering to the commerce and the influence of the city. So the state took control of the police department. Racist intentions, but that was never reversed post Civil War. And we're like only one of two cities in the whole country that doesn't have a local authority over their police department.
So resuming that responsibility, where the municipality, Baltimore City, now has control of its police department, what is that process of transition going to look like? I heard you say that the work begins to create it when session comes in January. So we know that the new governor takes office in January by proxy of winning the election. This charter item doesn't happen the same way. What is the process going to look like to actually receiving control of Baltimore City Police?
So the actual amendment language is just the first part. It shouldn't be any contention to it because it was sent to referendum because the legislature thought that this decision should be made by the residents of Baltimore. So essentially, the Baltimore delegation at the start of session should be able to just submit this language and that charter amendment should be ratified without opposition because it's already been before the legislature and they decided to let Baltimore City residents decide. Then the next step will be creating and proposing an administrative structure for the police department. And that's what the local control advisory board starts working on now, so we can get, once again, the state legislature, the Baltimore delegation, to propose this structure change. We're going to have to kind of start a process of undoing all of the protections and privileges that the state has given this police department over the years by undoing those structures. And once we get a accountability mechanism in place and an administrative structure, then we have this opportunity to kind of recreate how the chain of command goes and who the police commissioner reports to and things of that nature. Right now, we're limited, but it's going to grow as this process moves forward.
One of the biggest oppositions to progress in the police department has been the uh, police union. Will they have any power to oppose what's going to happen in the process? Because I can see when you start talking about the repeal of the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights and some of those other things that's already happened legislatively, what kind of policy changes and things of that nature that can happen. How do you see that? How do you see that either coinciding or either the police union posing, if any, opposition to those changes?
So I'm not even going to begin to imagine what's going through a police union's mind. But I will say that we do have police union representation on the local control advisory board. So they will have input on the process of creating, selecting how the police department is administered. What will the rank and file and the actual collective union feel about this? Don't really know. I'm not going to make pretend it's going to move my decision either way, but essentially they have a seat at the table and their representative will be given their input. And that's to be seen. Right now, we work together to get this far.
Let's get to what I believe people really want to know. What does it mean then that there's an administrative structure and things are put in place? What does the at the heart and at the core of Baltimore resuming control? What are some of the things that we know will be impacted, and what does that mean to Baltimore City in the sense of having responsibility for its police department?
So the initial piece is accountability. Accountability starts with access. So by bringing the administrative authority back to Baltimore, that gives local residents easier access to complain, be a part of the process, help build whatever this is going to be. It's a lot easier for people that live here that are actually impacted by the past police misconduct of the Baltimore City Police Department to go to Annapolis. So now that brings the authority to potentially create and implement police policies now at the local level instead of going to state legislature for the 3 month session to try to get things changed. And now we have the opportunity to create an oversight entity, so to speak, that's directly accountable to the residents of Baltimore without the implementation of state oversight being the rule.
You're also the guru as it pertains to our consent decree. And our consent decree was created, of course, under federal mandate and under the sense of control. How does this impact the consent decree, which the last I checked, we were nowhere near completing or coming out of?
We're still nowhere near. But so essentially, it doesn't affect the mandates of the consent decree. The consent decree was made with the police department and the city of Baltimore. We're still going to have that same police department, and we're still going to be the same city. There is a possibility of who kind of represents the city in those court proceedings. Now that there's this possibility that the administrative structure will be overseen by the city council and not the mayor's office. So it may have to add to who are the parties of the consent decree, meaning add city council members or whoever that person may be. But other than that, consent
Is
decree
it
is
is it
consent
is it
decree.
difficult to get those kind of amendments in, or is
It
Judge
shouldn't be.
Bedard and
I mean,
everybody on point because of they know what just happened?
it shouldn't be difficult because the consent decree doesn't supersede any laws. So the consent decree is about policy and practice of the police department, but state laws are state laws. We're actually, this process is ratifying state law to make this a local entity. So there's really nothing that the court can object to. So it should be a painless process. And I say should be because who knows what's going to happen in the future, bro. I got to keep it real. I mean, the tide shifts every day around here, and we don't know what kind of petty infighting for authority is going to happen now that we've got to this point. Politics in Baltimore is something crucial.
As a longtime advocate for police reform, this is the last question. I want to know how this measure getting passed to you, to Ray Kelly, not to the board member, none to Ray Kelly, a guy that's put his heart into this. How does this measure get passed impact what policing can and should look like moving forward in the city of Baltimore?
So I'll say this, and it's kind of paraphrasing what the mayor said maybe 8 years ago, is the police department can never be accountable to the people they serve as long as there's an intermediary. So the state could have always stepped in with us. So for me, I can remember when I first started this work. It was 2011. We were working on strengthening the CRB with Councilman Nick Mosby was our councilman then. And we were putting in the work, and we actually created some language. We gave it to the councilman. He went to get it researched. And then that's when we found out the first thing we have to do is get local control of the police department. That's for me when I found out. 2011, I found out that we weren't controlled by the city. And over the years, I've seen the many impediments not having local control as cards. If it's something as small as redistricting or something that could have been huge, like body worn cameras and things like that. We as a city couldn't respond to George Floyd the way other cities did because we had to wait for session to start in January to actually get anything done.
So
So
is this impending rush to get redistricting done kind of in view of local control happening? And how do you feel about the redistricting before we let you go?
So I'm only speculating. Well, from my perspective, redistricting is long overdue. I'm sure the way that I'm looking at these lines now, there was a lot of downtown influence in how those lines were drawn.
Mr. Costello is a happy man.
Well, there you go. But for real, we needed redistricting because we haven't had it in 50 years. Our numbers ain't true. We already have an officer shortage where we need to at least be able to address these areas with accurate information. So, like I said, redistricting is long overdue, but the motivation, like I said, the politics in this city is crucial. So we don't know. We do know, but it is what it is. You know they love their downtown around here.
We in it for the long haul. My friend and my brother Ray Kelly, I want to thank you again, man. You've been a constant contributor from the very first show that
First
we
show.
ever did on the Chop Shop. So you are a true veteran, man. Your wisdom, your knowledge, and your insights are always welcome around here. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And I think we may come back and unpack that redistricting question a little bit more at another time.
Appreciate you, brother. Everybody have a good holiday.
All right. Thank you, man. Happy Thanksgiving.
Peace.
All right, y'all. Listen, we're doing the show in segments now, and I love it. It doesn't seem like I got to try to force another 30 minutes of conversation, but I'm excited about these next 30 minutes because we're bringing on another major contributor to the show. You've seen him on national media, Roland Martin, and a few other places. He brings such keen insights. I just love being in the room with him when it comes time to talk advocacy because he has a balance of passion, intellect, and all of those things that really, really brings the matters home. He loves Baltimore. He loves Black people, and he loves our young people. I'm talking about the one and only director of policy for Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, Mr. Dayvon Love. Dayvon, thank you for being with us today, man.
Hey, what's up, bro? Always good to be with you, man.
Man, you always accept my invitation. You make me feel like I'm somebody, man. You really, really do. And man, I want to jump right into this conversation because I don't want to waste not a second of your time. We were both a part of the Squeegee Collaborative, and we know Squeegee is one of the hottest issues. We're looking at with the developments that are going on in this case involving the young man that's on trial for murder. And just, if you listen to WBAL radio and all of the other places, this is a hot button issue. But the perspective that we had from being in the room of the collaborative is a very unique one. And I wanted to bring you on because I know you would bring a level of poise and insight to this conversation that would help our viewers understand that this was a long 4.5 month process that's still not over, right? And that there were people in the room who were making sure that the balance, that there was balance. But before we get to that, tell the people a little bit about you.
I'm Dayvon Love, Director of Public Policy, LBS from Baltimore. As you mentioned, I love Black people, love Baltimore City. And as it relates even to the conversation around, the squeegee, one of the things that, growing up, I did debate in high school and in college, and that kind of set me on my course in terms of just my intellectual political development. And one of the things that for me was always important is staying grounded in my community and where I'm from. You know what I'm saying? In a lot of ways, the folks that I grew up around that really shaped my perspective and gave me my grounding. Whereas a lot of people may have decided to go on and do the more glitzy, more glamorous stuff. I have a mandate for my community. You know what I mean? And so even, again, talking about the stuff with, the squeegeeing and whatnot, I think about myself, my friends, I wouldn't have as a young person been someone who was squeegeeing, but I have friends that did and friends that would have, you know what I mean? And in a lot of ways, I feel like the controversy around squeegeeing is a proxy. In many ways, it's like a repository of all the negative stereotypes, images, stigmas about young Black people that are projected onto this issue. And that was one of the reasons why I stayed and was consistent in a lot of the Squeegee Collaborative meetings, because I wanted to make sure that perspective was held, that there was some clarity around the importance of understanding that, from a policy level, but really just in general. And I think it's also important to note too, and I want to give some credit to Faith Leach, who's the deputy mayor under Brandon Scott, who prior to the emergence of the Squeegee Collaborative, which I'm sure your viewers know, and I don't think anyone would dispute the fact of this, that it emerged after this white guy got killed. That's really what it's about, and I'll come back to the significance of that. But prior to the emergence of the collaborative, there was a men and boys of color cabinet. And many of the issues we covered in the Squeegee Collaborative overlap with work we were already trying to
doing. Yep.
You know what I mean? And so, and I think that's important for the listeners to know that work was already underway. And then circling back just to the Tim Reynolds and him being killed by the young man, I think it's really important for people to be clear that I think for many people that I talked to, that frequent the social spheres that I'm in. The notion that someone would shoot back against someone that swung a bat at him is a no-brainer, right? But it's just so it's intriguing to me that that perspective, you mentioned like WBAL radio. I don't know that I've heard that perspective countered. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if they allow the perspective that I'm talking about to counter the perspective that monopolizes their airways. You know what I mean? And it's frustrating because in many respects, a lot of the people that are opining about, this, they wouldn't last an hour in the world that a lot of the young people live in who squeegee. You know what I'm saying? And so yeah, I just so in terms of the commentary about it, I just think the fact that such a controversy goes to show just a level of disregard that the society generally has for the humanity, again, particularly of young Black people, working class Black people, poor Black folks.
I think what you said on the front end is a major part of that. And the major part is that it's filtered through these negative images of Black youth, that people kind of have their opinions as it comes down to everything to do with squeegee. One of the things that was highlighted greatly during the collaborative and through this administration is how for 40 years it's been picked up and dropped, and there's never been a system put in place that could outlive any particular administration. Do you think this administration more comprehensive approach is one that can last and will be able to be something that can move forward with your intimate knowledge of what these recommendations really mean?
So in one of the sessions, there was a woman who did an analysis and provided documents of the previous attempts at the issue. And so during I reviewed.
I remember her. She was sitting across from me.
Right. So reviewing the documents, and I remember asking a series of questions. Those questions included, did any of the previous plans address directly the way in which racism and white supremacy impacts how these young people are perceived? And, answer was no. Did any of these previous plans deal with the way in which racism impacts the neighborhoods, the communities these young people are from, and attempts to address that? The answer is no. So going down the line of these kind of questions, and what's interesting is in those meetings, when I raise that or others raise those kinds of aspects of the work, people will say, yes, we understand it, we hear it, wouldn't really refute it or rebut it. And so, and a big part of what I wanted to do was I wanted to play our hand in trying to, write some of the recommendations to make sure certain things were in there. My priority was around the criminal justice aspect. There are lots of other things that I think are important, but in terms of my particular expertise in advocacy, I wanted to make sure that there was not going to be a heavy-handed law enforcement-centric approach that is demanded by, some of the folks on the council, by the folks on BAL. Like, I wanted to ensure that wasn't something that infiltrated. And on that score, I think the collaborative did a good job, right? My concern, so I just mentioned the list of questions I asked the woman who did the research. I don't know that perspective is represented in the recommendations. I think the recommendations are good. I think the recommendations that focus on investments in outreach and services, and that being the primary approach, I think that's good. In terms of what makes it different than the previous, I think not a whole lot, right? Not a whole lot, because I believe that without, and there's there's a few parts where it talks about systemic challenges and historical structural issues, but if we don't get at the fact that we're talking about Black kids who these folks are scared of, and that driving the policy that governs, and that fear undermining the ability to see these kids as human beings, right? And developing solutions to the problems that those young people face that are not just about them, but about the community they come from and which shaped them, and the culture from which without addressing that, to me, directly, it limits the ability of the recommendation to be effective. I think, I trust Dr. Buntley and AIM, Moam rather, and I trust, their expertise in dealing with folks on the ground. So I trust that. But to your question, how different are the recommendations this time around than previous? It's better than what's previously happened. But for me, not nearly the North Star.
So let me ask you this question. The mayor has touted in his administration, much to the dismay of many onlookers, that he intends to have a total administration that addresses the full aspects of these social issues, much to the points that you raised. Do you feel like this plan falls short of that promise, or do you feel like the other areas in which he's committed to addressing these social issues that produce things like a squeegee culture picks up for where it's not in the recommendations?
I mean, I think the potential is there. Really, recommendations are, it's really about how you execute. I mean, that's really the most important thing. And so I think the recommendations, if executed effectively, can have a tremendous impact, right? And can have an impact that speaks to what the mayor intends. But that's something that we gotta see. That's not something that the recommendations will tell us. That's something that has to do with the execution of it.
Aside from yourself, one of the people in the room, probably second to yourself, that was really strongly against a real strong enforcement strategy was Police Commissioner Michael Harrison. Sometimes, to my own humor, hearing how adamant that he. Do you believe that this was the fact that there was? Do you believe that that was the balance of the space that we are in? That the majority of the room was like, we don't want to see something that criminalizes black men or young black boys in another way, but this is an opportunity for advocacy. Do you feel like that was the prevailing thought in the room?
So I think Commissioner Harrison was sincere in his pushback on that front. I think primarily from his vantage point, he gonna do what he's directed to do by the law department and the mayor, right? One of the dynamics that I felt was at play, and I can't prove it, but one of the dynamics that I think was at play is that I think that there are folks for whom felt that was lesser of who the criminalization of black youth is something for them that they actually a little bit less. They don't, it doesn't bother them as much.
Mm-hmm.
But they understood the environment. They understood the fact that this is people wanted to go in the direction of not criminalizing them. I don't think people are all the way honest about that. I tend to think that even people who talk a good game, people scared of black kids, you know what I mean, or black youth, particularly young boys, like they're afraid of them. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like if you've never interacted with young black people, you know what I'm saying? I just think there are a lot of folks for whom, and I don't know that we address that in a way that, to me, I thought would be transformative.
So when you put those kind of policy recommendations, because that's one of the places that from the heart of an advocate for these matters, full-time advocate, I don't get to be full-time just yet, full-time advocate for these matters, what does addressing those matters look like consistent with the assignment of the collaborative?
Well, for instance,
addressing the fear factor. I want to speak specifically to the fear factor because we know the great role that media plays in the fear factor as it pertains to this matter and really many matters involving black youth or black Baltimore, and the way that it portrays the ideas and the imagery associated with the ills of the black community. How does the Squeegee Collaborative and its role and its mandate address that?
So, and you mentioned the media. So I'm gonna use an analogy. Anyone who does environmental advocacy, like advocacy about the environment, and it's and that folks discover that there is something in the environment that is harmful to a community, right? Then that's cause for some kind of action to protect them. To if it's a plant that's producing toxic waste, right? To me, the equivalent is the images that we get every day in the media about Black youth, that it presents such a clear and present danger to the humanity of Black youth, not just in terms of, because if you think about every aspect of the kinds of services that get dealt with, one example, if we take like the police department and homicide, right? Like I know people who work, within law enforcement, who work within the state's attorney's office. And one of the things that you'll learn is that there's a level of lack of urgency and care when it comes to when Black people are killed, right? Like they don't value them, so the work is sloppier, right? There's less investment, less resources. It's harder to justify doing things the way they need to be done because because people don't care. And I think that comes from being conditioned by all of the various media that we're exposed to. Folks are conditioned not to care, right? They're conditioned to normalize the fact that folks don't have regard for Black folks' humanity. And so in terms of addressing it in the context of the Squeegee Collaborative, I think we had good conversations about it. But I think the question that we just, there are lots to deal with, and there wasn't time to deal with this issue to the extent that I would have liked, which is how do we hold accountable the major media outlets that perpetuate, that kind of imagery and stigma? What do we do culturally about the people who work in many of these major corporations who won't publicly say that they just want these kids gone, right? Like, what do we demand of who these people hire, right? Like, there was a gentleman on the collaborative who, highly ranking person at M&T, who would talk about some of his employees that were fearful, right? And that had issues. Well, for me, again, we didn't have time to get to this, but for me, a part of it is, what are you doing? What policies are you putting in place that you're bringing in people who want to be here and respect the people who are here, right? And so those are the kinds of things. But see, the difference is now we're dealing with multi-billion-dollar corporations, right? And that's a different kind of fight. But in terms of dealing with this particular issue of the stigmas and images of Black youth, like, to me, those are the kind of things that, to me, would be more transformational, going beyond what we actually ended up getting done.
When there was the initial conversation that gave out some insight, not a lot of insight to some of the recommendations, people picked up this guaranteed pay concept and ran with it. And the mayor in his press conference literally refuted it greatly by saying it's an earn and learn concept. And being in the room, I know the things that a young person has to do in order to be able to get the money. Do you see that as something that can be and will be effective as we look to shift the culture and get young people to make some other choices?
Well, I'm going to first give some credit to the mayor in refuting the way that it was characterized. Again, anything that looks like it's giving money to Black people, people are going to see it as inherently criminal. They're stealing it, right? They're not doing right by it. Now, and you and I know all the ways in which people in these major institutions hustle and grift all the time, right? But they're not pegged with, the same way that we, our community gets. So I want to give them credit for that. And I think now the guaranteed basic income policy is a popular policy, becoming more popular nationally, particularly among the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. And I think it's extremely important that the way that it is operationalized is going to be very important. Because I think this criticism that folks have of just giving people money and them not working for it, I understand what it triggers for people, and thinking we just handing out money. You just said that what folks are going to be asked to do to receive those dollars. I think it's going to be very important that any policy that particularly that deals with, in that kind of human social service vein, it's very important that those kinds of policies are always accompanied by something that facilitates that person being able to be self-sufficient, right? And so I think that's the thing that, at my understanding, the conversations that we're having in the collaborative, that's the intention, right? The intention is the resources to help to provide the space for that young person to do things so that eventually they won't need it, right? And eventually they'll be able to be self-sufficient. I think there are versions of the basic guaranteed income policy that have been rolled out that omit that part of it. And I think a lot of the criticism comes from folks who've only heard that the version of it where it's in perpetuity. Basic income, you get it in perpetuity.
And Baltimore actually does have that program in effect.
Right.
And I think for this particular group of people.
Exactly. And the administration, I think, could do a better job of explaining what they're asking folks who receive the guaranteed basic income to do in order to get those. You probably know better than me if they're being asked, if there's any particular thing that they're being helped with so that they're not needing it in the future. But if that distinction is the piece that, again, people who hear universal basic income, they're responding to that and not what we thought and talked about in the collaborative.
Well, it's a great segue, Dayvon, because one of the things that I came in the room trying to be adamant to people about is that this is a workforce issue, not a criminal issue. And that as we approached it, we needed to look at it like we have a concept in my day job where we do rapid response. There's a major business with a large workforce that's going out of business, and it's our responsibility to be able to get with those people, prepare them, and to move them as seamlessly as possible into another opportunity. And that was the concept that I viewed this with, probably from my years of working in workforce development. Do you feel as though there was like contention around the idea that we were dealing with, or this contention that is around the idea that we're dealing with a criminal justice issue versus how to move an entire workforce of people into a new means of income, if in fact the messaging shifts to more of a workforce dynamic, it can assist some of the people who are opponents to this process with being able to see it differently?
I think that it would be helpful for our people to get clearer about that, because I think there are a segment of people in our community who also share some of those views of just lock them up, get them off the corner, don't matter how kind of thing. So I think what you described, I think, will be helpful to our folks so that we're.
You don't think that language will speak to people outside of the Black community?
I don't think so. I think that, again, I think for many of them, Squeegee represents these bad Black kids that mess up their white fantasy land that they want to create in Baltimore. Because I think ultimately that's what it's about. Baltimore is changing. There are white people who are expanding in terms of the ability to gentrify, create new opportunities. DC is really expensive. There are places in Prince George's County, Montgomery County, people being pushed out. Baltimore is one of those places where it's a great location. And Haiti Squeegee kids go messing it up for them and their business opportunities. I think that's the way that they perceive it. And so, so I think we can get clear on that as a community. That's a workforce issue. I think when we speak to people outside of our community, we frame it that way. I don't know that that's going to change their minds.
What do you think really? And I hear what you're saying because you use some very pointed language. But what do you think? What would you think it would take to get business people to see the opportunity in having? Because right now there are 250 people who are on the books. Because matter of fact, let me go to this. 250 people who are on the books that have been receiving services and it is in this cycle. One of the things that people said, and to me it sounded like ignorance, but I was in the room, so it might have sounded ignorant to me. Well, let me go sign up to be a Squeegee kid since they're giving away money, when there's a database that's already been built of 250 people that have been in the mix long before there was money, right? What do you think limits a business community from seeing opportunity and possibility in these young people who are saying, man, I want to work. I get up every day. I go outside. I brave the elements. I brave law enforcement. I brave all of these things to wash windows so I can make a living. How do you not see opportunity? What is the blockage in a business community in Baltimore from seeing opportunity in that group?
the societal propaganda around white supremacy is deep. And a part of the impact that it has on folks' psyche, particularly when, again, we talk about young Black people, is their inability. See, it's one of those things where they've never experienced, encountered narratives of Black people producing things that are marked as high levels of civilization, right? What they've been exposed to is they go to college and the janitorial staff is mostly Black folks. You know what I'm saying? Or if they ever see a prison, it's Black folks in it, right? Or, when they look at the people who on the corners, it's like that is something that gets reinforced and it becomes so deep. And it's not necessarily a commentary on their character, because in some ways, these notions of internalized anti-Blackness and white supremacy are rational
Subconscious.
beliefs.
Yeah.
Right. And that rational beliefs give them the information made available to them. Right. And so I think that's the blockage, is that for many of them, they can't even imagine a young Black person being smarter than them. Right. They can't imagine a young Black person producing complex technological innovations that they didn't come up with. Like they can't imagine it. And a part of how I know that is being a person that's been at some of these tables. I watch the looks that I get, right? Where it literally does something to their psyche to experience a certain kind of intellect that they don't control, right? That comes from a body of someone that all they know is the notions of their inferiority. And it costs them, because I think if you think about globally, it's clear that there's movement taking place away from the core of Western civilization, and folks are going to like Southeast Asia. Africa is a place where folks are going to start going to build new experiences. There's even more festivals. People are starting to go to the continent to go to like major festivals in ways that weren't the case in the last 20 years. And the opportunity is being missed, especially being in the DMV, right? Where you have the highest population of high earning Black people in the country. So the opportunity would be great if someone was able to, if a lot of these business people were able to refute, to undermine some of the internalized white supremacy that literally blocks them from seeing these young people as potential contributors in ways that would benefit everybody. Everybody would benefit. But I think many of them have internalized that so deeply they can't see it.
That's one of the things when I was working at the Youth Opportunity Center, and I would go and I would talk to business and tell them about this great untapped resource. Dayvon, in our closing, I want you to, right now, let's imagine you have an audience of people to really be able to help them to understand the opportunity here, and specifically what our community needs to do to support this culture of young people through this transitional process, in support of the efforts of the collaborative.
Well, I would say this, and this applies to the collaborative and beyond. Black people, I think, traditionally are taught, and I think in good nature, and good intention, do what you got to do, go to school, get a good job, get out of here. And a part of what that has done is that it's created an environment where many of us leave our communities, right? Many of us are socialized to see our communities as something to escape from. And people have a variety of different reasons, to go where they go and do what they do. So this isn't necessarily about people's individual choices. What it is about, though, is that what that does is that it misses the opportunity for us as a community to use all that social capital, all that human capital in a way where we can truly be empowered. Because clearly, many of these major institutions don't see the value in our people. But if we are able to, have a relationship to our larger community, the masses of Black people that traditionally don't get access to these opportunities. And I know you've seen it, you know how it is, where people get to a certain level, get a certain title, right? And they like it, it gets good to them. And it's easy to get off mission. And so I think it's really important that, knowing that we're in a society where a lot of people with the biggest money are not going to see our community as the assets they are, right? To see the genius that exists in it. It's incumbent upon us to do what we have to do in order to create opportunities for our community, and to do it in a way that's about building up our community's ability to go to these major institutions from a position of strength and being able to say, here's what we can concretely do. I think that's something that's sorely missed. And I think if we were to focus on that, focus on us as a community, those of us that have access, right? Those of us that ascend to positions of political influence or corporate influence. And some of that's happening, but I just believe that too often people aren't looking at the potential power our community can have if we come together, because many people have not experienced power that doesn't come from a major white corporation or institution. But if we can experience what it means to actually wield power, having our own power base of our community and delivering for our community, I think the opportunities will be endless. And I think that's true for the Squeegee Collaborative. And the hope is that the kinds of work that Moam and others are going to do to reach the community and build that base and do for our community, that's going to contribute to us being able to create opportunities and to show up from a position of power and strength with the larger business community and say, look, you either take this opportunity or we're going to take it somewhere else. And I just think that's the attitude that I think it's important for us to develop.
Dayvon Love, man, our prayers and blessings be upon you and the leaders of A Beautiful Struggle and the great work that you continue to do around policy advocacy and just loving Black people and loving Black people specifically in Baltimore. Thank you again for being with us as this continues to be an ongoing issue and other things concerning the city of Baltimore, state of Maryland, as we get ready to come into another session. I know you're going to be back with us, giving us that great wisdom and insight. And I really appreciate you for being with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Hey, man, appreciate you. Anytime, bro.
All right. Man, listen, Chop Shop audience, I'm loving these segments. I'm loving that we're having brief to the point conversations. And I'm loving more than anything that you had continued to ride with us. I want to thank our guest tonight, Mr. Ray Kelly of the Citizens Policing Project. And I want to thank, of course, my brother again from Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, Mr. Dayvon Love. I want to thank my producer, who is the baddest man in the land, make the magic happen behind the scenes, Mr. Shaka Pitts. And I most of all want to thank you. As I always say, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? Absolutely it does. It makes a sound, it just was nobody there. We could be speaking into the wind, but we have an audience tonight. You continue to ride with us, even on a night when we're not regularly on. Remember, we'll be returning to our regular Thursday slot next week at 6 p.m., and we're building a powerful show for you. Be on the lookout for the flyers. I want to say, as I always say, make sure that you trust God. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. Be the change that you want to see. If you're in your local area, I told you I got so much joy and strength, even in this place where I'm already missing my grandmother and her favorite holiday, Thanksgiving, because I was able to get around and be a blessing to somebody else. Be the change you want to see. Reach out to somebody and help them. And above and beyond everything else, always remember that you can be more. Thank you for being with us again.
I can be more. There's nothing that I can't achieve if I just believe. You can be more. You can make every dream a reality. We can be more. Be more, be more.
Yeah.
I can be more.
I wake up every day and try to be more. I pray I be more. It's easy to achieve anything you believe. Like hold your head high. Girl, you got a reason to breathe. I see a rare mind. Boy, you got a reason to dream. Let's take flight. Give the children a reason to see redemption. We grow up in